All right, welcome everyone. We're just going to give everyone a few minutes to start to file in. We appreciate you being here today. We're starting just a little bit early because we have a lot to get to and some announcements to make during our process. So I'll start off and invite you to just relax. This is our time to connect, to have strong conversations. I am Dr. Dave Hester. I'm a part of the LifeGuides community. I am the vice president here at LifeGuides. And I'm just so thankful to be a part of this organization. My background is in cognitive neuroscience, as well as mental health counseling and curating new technology for the betterment of human well-being. And so I wanted to start by just saying thank you to everyone who's joining today, everyone who registered, to all the people who are watching on the archives in the future. We appreciate you taking time and clicking and checking out this video. We hope that you find something beneficial in our conversation today. So as everyone continues to file in, we're going to start in just a few minutes. But first thing, I want to talk about a really outstanding announcement, which is LifeGuides is rebranding, or we're altering what was called Thrive Time is now LifeGuides Connect. And there's a purpose behind this change. We made this change because we wanted to create, again, a community, a space where members, guides can have conversations, difficult and sometimes needed conversations in a place where we feel comfortable doing it. And so we thought long and hard, and we provided we got some insight from our guides, which I love that we are always using a bottom up approach as much as we can, getting information from our guides so that we're creating the best product, the best opportunity. So Thrive Time is gone. We appreciate everyone who helped create Thrive Time and get us to where we are. And we are now part of LifeGuides Connect. All right, so I want to check just to make sure if my audio is okay. Can everybody hear me? Leah and Carolyn, can you hear me okay? Got a thumbs up? All right, I'll throw one up there too. Fantastic. All right, well, let's start by introducing my wonderful guides who are joining me today. So Aaliyah is an Air Force veteran and founder of Work Culture Works, a workplace culture consulting business teaching managers how to create healthy and safe work centers. She takes great pride in helping others with chronic illness, veterans' career transitions, and navigating difficult work centers. She also has a history with leadership development and being a change maker, as well as building workplace relationships and culture and translating veteran skills, which is so needed right now with our veterans, coming in and out of what we call Gen Pop or civilian life, transitioning back to civilian life. It's so needed. So Aaliyah, thank you so much for being available today and having this conversation.
Yeah, of course. I'm so happy to be here. This is a very important topic, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Fantastic. All right. And also accompanying me today is Carolyn. Carolyn is a certified life guide, widow, nutritionist, and an advocate for early onset dementia patients and their caregivers. That is so needed right now. Again, caregiving, we're going to jump into it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Carolyn supports caregivers and those wishing to improve their mental and physical well-being through healing, mindfulness, nutrition, and physical activity. Carolyn, wow, thank you so much for joining me again. I think this is your second time joining our process here. So thank you so much for being available today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. Well, let's jump into it. We've been talking just in preparation for this discussion, and one question that went around, which I want to start with, is a question near and dear to my heart. But I want to start with you two, which is when did you first come to awareness of what mental health was, or when did you realize that mental health is necessary? What was that first touch point for you? So let's start with Aaliyah. Can you share with us, just your experience there?
Yeah. So mine actually happened while I was active duty. It was 2015. I was deployed. I had an event that happened to me that was life-changing, and coming from military parents and being in a military career since the age of 18, you're kind of taught to live by the "you're tough, you'll be fine, get over it, move on." And I was not fine. I was not okay. I was not moving on. I was stuck in a repeated cycle of fear and panic and anger. And that was the moment I realized I really need help. This is the way that I'm feeling is no longer within my control. And that is scary. So that was when I started learning about the triggers and mechanisms that were happening in my own brain.
Nice. Yeah. It always start, sometimes it doesn't always start, but I believe that it starts with ourself, kind of
Mhm.
identifying that something's not right. Well, let's bounce over to you, Carolyn. What's your experience of that first time where you realized, mental health is important?
I think the first time was when I was 10 years old. And I remember this incident so clearly. I can see the room. I can see what I'm wearing. I can see my hand holding paper. I was giving a report at school in third grade about something. The word aluminum was in my report. And for the life of me, I could not say aluminum. I tried and I tried. My teacher did not intervene. And I remember feeling as I was kind of growing to panic when I couldn't pronounce this word, there was a part of me inside that was noticing that my rising mental anguish over not being able to pronounce the word was causing me more and more internal angst and panic. So this little my consciousness inside was watching me become more and more upset over this. And at that very moment, I think I realized, oh, my mind and my internal consciousness are not quite in sync here. And I am allowing myself to become more and more anxious. And that is just devastating my performance. And I remember that incident. It comes to mind often. I'm just aware that there is a place of calm inside of us. Sometimes it's hard to reach. And even as a 10-year-old, I could see the disconnect.
Wow. I mean, that's early. 10-year-olds typically can't tell you every you know, every star in the sky because of course it's hard. Of course they can't tell you every star in the sky. And the word you mentioned, of course, I started to think about aluminium, which I think is how you say it. And my British friends would say it that way. So I immediately thought about messing, kind of messing about and saying a word in different intonations or phrasing. And to add on, my experience was similar to yours, where I was 13 and a part of a sports team, and I just wasn't doing well. But I knew what to do. My body knew what to do. I had the muscle memory, so to speak, on how to perform properly. Yet I just was in my head that thought kept popping in: you're going to fail, or you're going to miss, or you're not going to make it. And it was at that time that I realized something, just like you said, was not right. Something was off. I was beating myself up to the point where I couldn't perform. I, would go to the events, and besides, sorry, trigger warning, everyone, besides vomiting right before the event, I was completely torn up and just taken aback by how much I didn't know about myself and how much I didn't know what triggered me. So you talked about, I'm going to jump to you for a second, Aaliyah. You talked about your experience in the military and how you knew something, wasn't right there. When that happened, can you take us just through your experience and your journey of seeking help or learning on how to support yourself?
Sure. It actually took me a little bit to ask for help. And I think a lot of us go through that. I the awareness, the mindfulness of the scenario did not occur immediately. It was probably over a year before I realized my emotions are different, my reactions are different. I my ability to maintain control of my own reactions is has significantly changed. And at the time, I also felt very strongly that no one would believe me. And so I felt very alone. I felt very, I can't tell anyone because no one will understand. No one will believe me. And especially in the military, there's also that stigma of your career may end if you ask for help. And so there's a whole lot of bottling and ignoring and tucking it back inside and just hoping for the best until one day it just kind of explodes like like something that's been compressed inside of a can and then just in your face. And that's kind of what happened. I had a complete meltdown one day and I realized I didn't even need anyone to tell me. I knew I really I need to get some help. So it was not until 2017, so 2.5 years later, I finally said, hey, I need help. I'm not doing very well. And even then, it wasn't over because I struggled finding the right person to help me. Finding the right provider, the right therapist, the right person can also be just as much of a struggle as processing those feelings. So it was not actually until 2023 that I was finally able to find someone to help me unlock, to break that code, to really understand why I was having the reactions I was having, showing me how to process that information, those feelings in a healthy way. And I can't tell you the release that I have felt now that I am no longer carrying that. The fear, the panic, the paranoia, and the anger, primarily the anger. I don't feel that anymore. And you can't imagine the relief until it's gone.
Oh, I feel that because it's a challenge, and I've worked with the military previously. I was a part of Beacon, one of the largest providers for military one source. You're probably well familiar with that as well as a resource for military vets. And I can't say how often I receive the I'm not going to ask for help because it's going to mess up my career. And how often, even in corporate America and around the world, people are they're reluctant to ask for help or even share that they are dealing with challenges mentally for the fear that they'll be talked about or won't get that promotion or it'll be
Yep.
used to retaliate against them. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation now because as we continue to have conversations like this, we're normalizing mental health support. We're normalizing it's okay to not be okay. And we're
Mm.
normalizing asking for help. So, Carolyn, I wanted to see if you had anything to add with that, just as far as your experience of really being able to find help and to develop, new practices when you learned about how you can help yourself with mental health.
Well, I think that key, absolutely, finding the right person is so important. I think the first time I reached out for assistance, professional assistance, was when my husband was dying, and that brings up I was a full-time caregiver. He was home with me. It was COVID. I had only I could had caregivers that came in for half an hour to help me change him for a couple of years. And I realized I was not okay. I was grieving the loss of my person. And for those of you who are caregivers, it is 24/7, exhausting. I was trying to work at the same time. And yes, I, like you, Aaliyah, just reached the point where I said, I am not okay. I wasn't trusting myself. Um, I wasn't even able really to tune into myself anymore. So I found someone who's wonderful and who was very well informed about grief. I have learned so much about grief. And the number one issue I've learned is we do not talk about grief and loss in this society very well. So it leaves those who are grieving and who are suffering loss kind of floating out in nowhere, trying to grab onto something that can sustain us. And when there is nothing to sustain us, there's nothing. So I think this is not, it's not just, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we could connect people with someone who can help them, who can speak with them, who can understand, who can listen, who can empathize. Because if you don't have that support, you're just totally alone and floundering.
Wow. Yeah. And speaking of alone, this is what we're doing right now. We're changing the narrative. If any of you have opened up any news recently, you've seen that isolation is up. People are feeling more alone. They're feeling disconnected. So what we're doing here is we're connecting people. We're talking, we're having conversations, we're having intimacy. We're learning about each other. And I know people hear intimacy and they immediately think of sex, and it's not just sex, it's other pieces of life that includes an intimacy. I like, Carolyn, that you mentioned how important it is to, kind of understand yourself and know what works and know what doesn't work. And so I wanted to ask both of you, because I saw in one of your notes you mentioned, who do you surround yourself with? This is a fascinating question when you think about mental health and how it can potentially affect you. So I'll start with you, Aaliyah. Like, how do you build boundaries and structure who you're around with?
That's such an interesting question. And you have to think about that in the concept of both positive and negative influences, because you are the blend of the five closest people to you. You become the five closest people to you in many ways. So if you keep yourself surrounded by negative people, of course, you're going to feel negative. If you keep yourself surrounded by people that don't understand mental health or don't even acknowledge the importance of mental health, of course, you're never going to encounter the support that you need. But if you're surrounding yourself by people that love you and understand you and respect you and want nothing but the best for you, and that constant positivity, you're going to have the support that you need to reach for that help that you need. If you're not even being supported from the beginning, from the baseline, of course you're never going to reach that point where you can reach out for someone that can take you to that next step where you feel that relief.
Outstanding. Carolyn, how about you? How do you build that community, that connection?
I find that I like being around people who are curious. I like being around people who are curious and people who are interested in really concrete things. So being around people who approach a problem not with angst or anger or anxiety or we have to fix this, more with curiosity. And okay, how can we work together to come to a solution, no matter what the problem is? And I don't. I think that when I'm surrounded by people who are curious and caring and empathetic, and who always are ready to ask why, I feel like I'm surrounded by people who are solid, people who will show up. And so surrounding yourself with people who will show up for you. I think the first thing though is to show up for yourself. So once you've shown up for yourself, then you can start identifying who are the people that I need to surround myself. How can I support them? How can they support me?
Outstanding. And there's what I heard there is the importance of that symbiotic relationship, or that, that relationship where you're both learning. You're both learning from each other and about each other. And earlier, Carolyn, you mentioned grief, and how we don't talk about it enough. And I think sometimes we don't attribute where grief is actually popping up. For example, if you have a best friend at work and all of a sudden they're gone, like you can at times grieve their presence being absent from being around you. And we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about how changing new policies within an organization can bring up some responses of grief. And I want to take we've talked a little bit about grief and some of the hard pieces there. let's talk about some of the fun stuff. Mindfulness is really big. For those of you who don't know, mindfulness is not meditation. I want to be clear on that. From this, the scientists, have broken it down that mindfulness is not meditation, but I want to specifically talk about mindfulness and how you've used it to improve your mental health. So let's actually flip it this time. I'm going to go back to you, Carolyn. How do you use mindfulness to improve your mental health?
I think a lot of mindfulness is acceptance and surrender. Um, Many times we're so intent upon having things the way we want them to be that we will exhaust ourselves and everyone around us, trying to push people into what we want them to be, the situation to be what we want it to be. Sometimes I think we just need to step back and realize that, oh, this is as it is. Then this next step is kind of dealing with the emotions. How do I feel about this? And just coming to terms with this is the reality. Set the emotions aside because they're not very helpful at this point. Identify them. I know how I feel. I feel happy. I feel sad. I feel devastated. I'm grieving. Okay, I accept that. I accept I'm grieving. Now what? And that right there that's the clue. Now what?
You're talking about choice there. We have the
And
power of choice. We can, when you say now what, it's like, do I choose to stay in it? Which is, it's okay to feel your feelings and be in it, but then you have a choice. Do I get out of it? So let's hear from you, Aaliyah, on just mindfulness and how you use it or how you found success in using it to improve your mental health.
Sure. I when I think of mindfulness, I think of understanding the why. Um, if you can unlock the code and break into your own psyche and understand why you're reacting the way you are. Yes, Bob at the grocery store cut you off with his grocery cart. Why am I so mad at him? Why did that make me so angry? Poor Bob doesn't deserve all this anger. Where is it coming from? If you understand the source of the anger, that mindfulness can help you take that off of your shoulders and set it down. And you look at Bob and you don't feel a thing. You say, that's unfortunate. You felt like you needed to cut me off, but I'm good.
And may I add to that?
Yeah.
Dave? I think that at recognizing where it's all coming from is so important. That why is really, really important. And you've mentioned react. And I've been thinking a lot about the difference between reacting and responding. I try so hard now not to react. I take that extra 2, 3, 4, maybe 10 breaths, maybe I need a day to think about how do I want to respond and how do I want to show up as me? Do I want to be empathetic? Do I want to be caring? Do I want to be accusatory? It makes a very big difference inside me on how I show up in the face of adversity.
Wow. I'm going to use that one definitely. That reminds me of Daniel Kahneman. He's written about this and specifically about how we have system 1 and system 2 thinking. And when you're talking about reacting, that's typically system 1. It's just an automatic pathway that we built through our life, through our experience, and we're just like, boop, that's how we respond, quick and easy. But taking that second thought, that second system, and stepping back is so powerful. It's especially powerful if any of you have kids. Kids are really good at messing with your nerves. It's so beneficial to take that moment and step back before just going through to the the parent shopping, I guess we'll call it. We don't condone any physical violence against kids, but you know what I mean. Sometimes they can get out of hand. So Aaliyah, we're talking about the importance of taking care of ourselves. how can others, maybe do a self-check? Like, what do you use as a self-check to know when you're moving out of that mental health equilibrium?
I look for the physical reactions that we don't necessarily think about. I do a pulse check. I do a breathing check. I do all these things that come along with emotional responses that we may not necessarily be aware of in when we're first building up. That build up comes with a lot more than just that emotional response. And so if I do a quick pulse check and say, "Oh, I feel I'm building up. I'm not giving that to you today. Not today, Jesus, not today." Yeah, I just try to be very, very aware of how my physical reactions are in correspondence.
Absolutely. Carolyn, would you like to add to that one?
I would. I think my first what I first notice is if I'm closing down, if I'm tightening, if I'm not being open. And as soon as I feel myself closing, I know I'm in trouble. So my very simply, my method is to, as soon as I realize that I'm tightening up, I'm closing off, relax my shoulders, relax my hands, relax my breath, take some deep breaths and try to open up. And sometimes that requires looking at the problem from the other way around. I see things as a sum of my experience. But the person I'm interacting, they're seeing things from the sum of their experience. And a lot of what I think is important for me is to give a moment to realize, oh, we are coming from different places, and your experience is as valid as my experience. So I need to open my heart, open my ears, and listen to what you have to say. And then we can move forward.
Nice. Nice. That reminds me of a book, The Untethered Soul.
I love that
Um,
book.
it's helped me because
Yeah.
it taught me exactly what you were talking about, where I can feel myself closing up. And when we close our brain, we get a narrow view, meaning you can't see anything other than what you're focused on, which that is our superpower. We don't talk about a lot. Attention is really one of our great superpowers. It's one of the things that we can control and that we can put, and whenever we put it on, elevates and expands. There was a question in the chat that I do want to just highlight really quickly about the difference between mindfulness and meditation. So most people have heard of mindfulness meditation, which is putting those two things together. But the difference is meditation, it can come in different forms. Open monitoring, where you're just, kind of letting things come to you. There are guided meditations where you are, laser focused on a specific topic. And the difference there between that and mindfulness is mindfulness can have long lasting traits, meaning you can have trait mindfulness where you're walking down the street and you just look at the flower, next to you on the that's growing, and you're a little bit more aware. You're more open to, oh wow, that's a flower. I'm going to sit for a moment and be with it. That is the difference between mindfulness. Whereas a flower meditation, you would, meditate on a clock, sitting cross-legged or on your back. There's so many forms of sitting, so all are valid. And that's a little bit of the difference between mindfulness and meditation. But good question. And again, if you have questions, definitely throw them in the chat. So I want to move on to another question that came up, which is, we're people leaders. Most of us are either entrepreneurs or, leading other people. How do you identify or even create a space to ask someone if they're dealing with mental challenges or mental health, difficulties? How do you ask? How do you approach that?
I can step in here.
Go for it.
I think a lot of that has to do with just being aware and listening to the person, coming out and saying, well, what's your problem today? Really? um, I think if when we encounter someone who is having some issues, encountering some problems, that will come up. It will come up if we allow ourselves to listen and to step back from our ego and step back from needing to be heard and really listen to the person in front of us. And then by responding in a curious way, caring way, you kind of just holding space in your heart to hear someone. And then once you get that conversation started, then you can see how deep it will go. But holding space, I think, is the most important thing.
Nice. Space in your heart too. That's a good ad. Holding space in your heart. Leah, what about you? How do you approach it?
I think as a leader, you have to have that relationship with your people that would allow you to even be able to ask that question. You have to have a level of trust that goes both ways for them to be open to that conversation. I can tell you from experience, when I had someone ask me, "Are you okay?" That was not an individual that had invested in that relationship with me. So I told him, "I'm good." And that was it. We're not going to talk, because that individual did not invest in that trust between us. You have to trust them to tell you the truth when you ask them, but they also have to be able to trust you that you are going to do safe things with that information if they give it to you.
Wow. Safe things with that information. And we talked a little bit earlier, or I mentioned about the military and how people feel like it could be used against them if they ask for help. That's how you build, trust over time, is by being vulnerable, which is again something that we're learning to do more in culture, and being, I guess, assuming positive intent or positive behavior, from others. Like, all right, I'm going to share this with you, and I'm going to assume positively that you're not going to use this against me for whatever reason. You have to build that. And I love that you mentioned relationship. If you didn't put in the time into the relationship to build or create that safe space, just busting in and saying, "Hey, you're dealing with XYZ, you need to do this," is probably not going to get the response that you're looking for. Relationship is important for everyone's mental health. And that relationship comes in many forms: business relationship, personal relationship, physical and love relationships. But then there's also this kind of relationship within organizations where teams work together. There's a relationship that has to be worked on there. So as we're talking again about awareness, so developing that self-awareness. Carolyn, you mentioned taking a step back. I love that, and I want to practice it more. But when you are developing your own self-awareness, where do you start?
Well, I think that your self-awareness starts probably as an infant. So I think your question is more of when do you intentionally start to develop those skills?
Yes.
And how? I believe a lot of it is, again, just surrendering, opening up, being very aware of how you feel, how you respond, how you react, being curious. Again, as Aaliyah mentioned, why? What's the why? Instead of when someone says something that just rankles me a little bit, instead of going, "Well, why did you say that?" I think it's more important to ask myself, why is that bothering me? What's inside me? What in my experience? Why is this bringing something up in me? Because my response has nothing to do with the other person's words. My response is inside. So I think that's very much part of what I do, Dave, is try to remain very mindful in the moment. How do I feel? Why do I feel this way? Is there anything I can do about this? Is it great? Keep it. This is wonderful. And if it's not great, okay, is there anything I can do about it? Maybe not. So if there's nothing I can do about it, then just release it. And that is not as hard as it sounds. It is a practice. It's not something I learned overnight. It's something I will continue to learn throughout my life. But that ability to recognize and to let go has helped me probably more than anything else in my self-awareness.
That's helpful. I like the fact that you incorporated releasing it. That's so important because there's some things that are just outside of our control, yet we take on the responsibility that it is that we're accountable or responsible for it.
Or we're going to
Um,
pick the world up and tell it's the way we want it.
that's right. That's wow. You basically pulled it out of my head. Okay, looks like we're getting more and more in sync as we continue to to talk more with you, Aaliyah. Especially with your background coming from the military and working with organizations in the way that you do. We have to adapt to trauma, but trauma is everywhere. Sometimes people don't even acknowledge the trauma that they've been through as trauma. But I wanted to just dip a toe into the trauma pool and how trauma can affect mental health from your experience, within the military and then working with organizations.
I think that when it comes to trauma, trauma is so varied. There's so many different kinds of trauma, and everyone's reaction to that particular trauma is going to be individualized. It's never going to look the same from person to person. So just acknowledging and respecting that this person has dealt with something may or may not be able to relate to, but it is something that was so traumatic to them that it has affected the way they are reacting to future events. That is all you need. That is all you need to understand that this person might need a different approach to particular scenarios. And I don't think that's a lot to ask, especially if you already have that relationship with your people.
Wow, that's perfect answer. No notes, as they say. Uh, it makes me think when we're talking about trauma, trauma informed care is also culturally informed care. Now, of course, I am using clinical terms, but they also apply to military, to work life, to even schools. Uh, Being culturally informed is important as well. Sometimes other cultures don't process or even accept some of our natural things that we take for granted the same way. And we have to be aware and sensitive to that so that we don't, you know, uh, make anyone mad or to trigger anyone. And I know some people are like, all right, here we go. We have to, trigger warning. We've got to walk on eggshells. I disagree with that type of thinking. I think we're all learning how to treat each other, and we have to see the value in learning that people grieve different, people believe different things, and people accept or see trauma differently. So we've talked about trauma. Now I want to move into the other side of trauma, which is resilience. How you can continue on to continue to push forward. uh, Carolyn, we've talked about this before about building resilience and cultivating it, but I want to hear, just some ideas on how you've continued to be so resilient, through the challenges that you've been through in your life.
Well, let's go to the very basics because this is kind of important to have a foundation. I think to be resilient and to build resilience, we need some basic good health too. So in working with people, I find that often when we get stressed or facing trauma, people stop eating, don't eat well, don't get enough sleep, don't stop getting exercise. Well, these are the fundamentals, right? Sometimes I will find and my family has told me this, I will find myself getting anxious or upset, and I'll say, go take a walk, mom. Or have you eaten? Well, you know what? Now it's taken me years to figure this out, but I know the first thing to look for when I'm feeling anxious and not feeling like I can pop back. Have I eaten? Have I slept? And it's surprisingly common for us not to look at those very basic things. Many of us just are eating whatever is available. It's not supporting us nutritionally. We cannot support our minds either without good nutrition. Exercise is phenomenally important to us. This is something we really need to get every day. And as far as, building resilience, it's curiosity again. Everything that happens to us carries a lesson. And I'm finding that I can rail against something and fight against it, or I can ask, hey, universe, what are you trying to teach me here? And try to figure out what is the lesson that I can take away from this. That gives me control. That gives me something to build my resilience.
Wow. Thanks for setting the foundation there. That's important. Aaliyah, I want to kind of ask a question based on her baseline, her foundation that she laid, and ask how important is exercise and nutrition, in the mental health process, in your experience, and in you supporting others.
Yeah. So when we consider how much trauma affects us physically, remember when we are triggered by something, our frontal cortex will shut down, our hearts will start racing, our breath will get out of control. All of these things are affected when we're triggered. So if our body is trained, if it has a way to cope with those triggers, then your body's going to process those reactions a lot easier. If your body is not trained or prepared for those kinds of reactions, you're going to have much more impactful physical responses as well. So when you're taking care of yourself, when you're talking about self-care and resilience, it's not just about mindfulness and understanding how to react. It's also preparing your physical body for that trigger.
Wow, you're talking about training there, kind of like training your body to be prepared when the stress comes back, because it's going to come back. It's not,
Going to.
we're
Yeah.
not going to be free of it.
And I do want to say that I think the key to resilience is connection. And the reason I say that is it's very easy to want to give up if you feel like you're alone. If you feel like you're the only one that has ever felt this way, if you feel like there's no one on this planet that could possibly understand the fear that I'm feeling right now, of course you're not going to latch onto that resilience, But if you make that connection with someone and that person shows you, I went through the same thing and it's okay, you're going to get through it too. That hopelessness, it's a lot harder to hang on to it when you know you're not the only one feeling that way.
And isn't it surprising how often we don't recognize that other people feel the same way? We go into that feeling of being alone, and then we just close ourselves off. And sometimes just reaching out, I don't know, I've had conversations with people in line at the store that I walked away from going, that was fabulous. What a beautiful person. And I just, my whole day is lit up by just this short encounter, which always reminds me what we say and do every minute of every day makes a difference to those around us. And they make a difference to those around us. So that smile you give to someone that you're crossing the street and just pass this random stranger, give them a smile. That's connectivity.
It's also a supportive relationship. I mean, albeit short, but a supportive
Mhm.
relationship in that you are supporting another human being by saying, I see you. I
I
see
see
you're
you.
existing and I see that you're living, and that's cool. And I think we need to do that. We need to normalize that more too. Here in Seattle, we have this thing called the Seattle Chill, which is people who come here, they feel like everybody's cold. Like if you try to go up to someone and say, "Hey, how you doing?" They're kind of gonna look at you like, "Why are you talking to me?" No one talks to each other here, and so it's called the Seattle Chill. But I'm noticing that even policymakers are trying to turn that around by building cafes where people are incentivized for coming into the cafe and just having conversations with a random person that they never met before. And there's something that does to our brain too. It lights us up because we're learning something new. It's like when you first rode the bike. It seemed hard, but that's because your brain was trying to figure out how to balance yourself. And then once you balance, now you can do it, with your eyes closed. Don't do that though. That's potentially dangerous. Um, so as we are, moving through, I love that you added the importance of just smiling at people. Um, One piece of mental health, uh, I guess you could say interventions that work is the you're probably familiar with the power pose. Are you familiar with that? Sheryl Sandberg, that's the first person I learned from. She was the head of Google, head of Facebook, and she talked about the power pose where you kind of stand with your hands on your hips, even in the morning, just looking in the mirror and just saying, "Hey, you, today's the day. Let's do our best and leave out the rest." Just standing like that sends this message through the body that everything's okay and that you can do it. That's a huge part of mental health. So, are there any like niche, tools or interventions that either of you use that's been successful, to help rebalance your mental health?
I have quite a few.
Oh, well, let's talk
Yeah,
about it.
they're just tiny little modifications that we can make during our day that does make it affects us and it affects those around us. Keep the corner of your mouth turned up. Just being aware of the beauty around us. I like, Dave, when you're talking about looking at the flower. One of the things that I will try to do is when I'm feeling just overwhelmed. I'll try to look at something with new eyes. I'm a painter. So I instead of looking at a tree and just seeing tree, I can see the holes in the sky holes. There's always another way to look at things. Like this is what I'm trying to get at. So if you try taking, for me anyway, if I try to take a new perspective, be it this beautiful tree I'm seeing or the gorgeous flower or the beautiful eyes that the lady at the market has, or the gentle way that she helped the woman in front of me. I think appreciation for me, having gratitude and appreciation can change my whole day and change how I interact with others. If I wake up in the morning and go, yes, great day, get my shoes on, head outside. I see people out walking their dogs. I meet new dogs. I just, just recognizing the joy.
Mhm. I like that. Recognizing the joy. Wow. Um, I want to add real quick, and then I want to go to you, Aaliyah, that when you're talking about looking at things in a different way, there's a scientific kind of phrasing around it, which is called the beginner's mind. It's also connected to, Buddhist teachings. And when you take that beginner's mind, you can look at things differently, but you can also build in like a sense of creativity because you can say, all right, here's this tree. How can I look at it differently? And that can have immense effects on your mental well-being because you can feel like things aren't just one way, they're not linear. So I want to ask you as well, Aaliyah, what are some of those tools or some practices that you use to rebalance your mental health?
So I take a lot of joy in making someone else's day better. So if I'm struggling with my own day and my own attitude, I will actually go out of my way to make someone else's day better. And that in turn makes me feel better. So it could be something as simple as, hey, I really like your hair. And, to me, it's not a big deal, but that person's going to think about that for a while. And that means the world to me. So that kind of brings me back to where I want to be.
Oh, that's so wonderful. And when you said that, I'm just going to share. I immediately thought about when I was in San Jose recently at the GSV conference, and someone stopped me when they were like, "Hey, I love your hair," and I remembered that person for the rest of the day because they
Yeah.
like had to cross the escalator and the comments to say it,
Yeah.
and it was just one of those moments where it's like, wow, that was really nice. And just like you said, doing it for another person is also supporting you because like you said, you feel better after doing something like that. It's those random
Yeah.
acts of kindness and awareness and acknowledgement that are really, really, really huge.
Yeah.
All right. So we are winding down. We've enjoyed this wonderful talk we've had. I mean, today I'm feeling not only fulfilled, but excited about the future because we've got some pretty cool humans actually trying to be better at being a human. So with all the technology, coming out, we have AI and we have, different forms of technology. They're never going to be able to replace the creativity, the empathy, the love, the compassion, which is the action. I learned that from Mark C. Shout out to Mark C. The compassion that is inherently human. So I'm glad that we can bring these human elements and the people here can have fun. If you have any last questions, please pop them in the chat. We'd love to answer, any direct questions. I'm just looking through the chat here. Paula mentioned reframing. That's exactly it. When I talked about, just kind of, or when Carolyn mentioned looking at a tree differently, and I was talking about the beginner's mind, reframing is all a part of that. Good ad, good ad. All right, so I'm looking through and it looks like we do have a question. All right, they're asking for links to any of the references that we mentioned. Just know that our wonderful producer, Sharon, will be sending out a follow-up, which will have links to some of the resources that we have. There are other resources that we can use. Yeah, are there any other resources that you can think of just to throw in for the last couple of moments here, Carolyn or Leah, that people could find benefit in using?
Dr. Dave, you mentioned Michael Singer's books, The Untethered Soul and Living Untethered. Excellent, excellent books. For me, it took a while to kind of get it. And when I got it, it was like a light switch went on. But that's just an introduction to how many fabulous resources there are available to us. We have the Find Center, which is connected with LifeGuides. And if you go to the Find Center, there are numerous videos and book reviews available for us there, or contact the LifeGuide. LifeGuides have a lot of connections that they can refer to also, which might help you make those, find the information you're looking for.
Wonderful mention there. And Find Center, I use it every day. I use it to find my Huberman Lab podcast, and then I make a playlist of the neuroscience and the neurobiology of well-being because I'm just interested in learning more. So Find Center, and that'll be a part of the resources list that comes out. So I want to ask you as well, Aaliyah, any other random resources you can think of since we're wrapping up today?
Yeah, I really like a book. It's called Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson. It teaches you about your attachment styles and how you can cope with trauma and just daily stressors, understanding your attachment style. And that has been extremely helpful for me.
Okay. And this is why we ask this, people, because I'm going to look that book up and read that because I'm interested recently in attachment styles. I saw a meme fly around about my attachment style is this or my attachment style is that, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting that we're sharing information because we all connect and have different styles, and once we know what the signs are, we can help others and be like, okay, this may be a maladaptive style. I just want to let you know. and it may not work for me. But wonderful that you shared that. The podcast that I mentioned, I saw that come through in the chats when I answer, is the Huberman Lab. Dr. Huberman is out of Stanford University. He's a wonderful neurobiologist and neuroscientist, just putting out really, really good information on the betterment of mental health. So I do highly recommend that. All right, I'm all choked up because this has been wonderful and outstanding. I love everyone in this community. I truly mean that. Any last parting words, for our group before we sign off?
I guess I would just say, take time to enjoy every day and find those joyful moments during the day, either connecting with other people or just enjoying nature around you. I think a lot of our mental angst has to do with the fact we just don't connect. We're busy. We stay in our silos. We don't talk to people. We don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable and accessible. We try to wall ourselves off and we feel be safer. We're not safe by ourselves. We're safer with a community, and a community that's strong and supportive can help us all. We all do better when we do better, right? Everyone does better when each of us.
Thank you. And Aaliyah, please share yours. And we do have one question to answer right before we depart.
Oh yeah, of course. I'll just reiterate. There are a million ways to remind yourself that you are not alone. The hopelessness comes from feeling alone. So if you want to check yourself, do something to make yourself feel around people that matter to you. And that's also why Life Guides are here, to make sure you never feel like you're alone.
Wonderful. All right. One of the last questions that came through is from Jeanette. She mentioned she's been having a really bad day and can't shake it, and that she's had to hide tears, coming to her eyes. And what should she do, when having a bad day? So I'm glad we got a little bit of time so that we can help support her here with this. If you would like to start, Aaliyah or Carolyn, I'll defer to you on how you would approach, having a bad day.
Well, it's also very individual, isn't it? So I think it depends on you, to our questioner. What elevates you? What makes you feel better? And I think Aaliyah made a very good point earlier. Making somebody else smile sometimes is the best medicine for yourself. So I guess I would say, find a person that loves you, cares about you, someone you can connect with, or someone who is a stranger who you feel comfortable just pouring out your heart to. Connect and open yourself up to healing. Sometimes it's a choice. We have to be ready to heal.
Standing.
No, I agree. I think that connection is the solution for a large majority of our problems and our concerns. When we feel like we have a connection to someone, it's a lot harder to allow yourself to go off that deep end. So connection is very important.
And often I'll find in working with somebody that once we start talking about a problem, we'll start laughing.
Yeah.
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 Things that seem so hard and so serious and so overwhelming. Sometimes once you start discussing them, you go, "Oh, this is hilarious."
Yeah.
We can have a great laugh over this. And yeah, I get it now. I see what was bothering me, and it doesn't need to bother me. Okay.
Wow. I'll share one last thing that came through the chat, which I would share to this question. Dance like nobody's looking.
Yeah.
Wonderful ad. Dancing like nobody's looking is a great way to reconnect with your body. It's a great way to kind of release energy and to recalibrate yourself, especially after a difficult day. Put on some cool tunes and lose yourself in the music and dance like nobody's looking. which I'm a horrible dancer, contrary to popular belief. So, doing while nobody's looking makes me feel much better from my experience. Well,
and I've done that.
go ahead.
Dave. After my husband's death, I have found that going out and just dancing like no one's looking. Yes, it's this wonderful movement. So dancing, walking, running, pickleball, physical activity sometimes connects you back to yourself and releases so much anger. I don't think go dancing again.
I might go do it again too. To close it out, our questioner responded that she's now smiling. So thank you both for making changes in the lives of others. Thank you all for being here today for our new LifeGuides Connect. We look forward to seeing you next time. Share the word, share the video. We want to heal and support as many people as we can. All right, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.